Welcome to Ideas, a time of conversation about all things board games. Community is built on conversations, and games are built on ideas.
Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy with the Chance of Meeples. Welcome to some fresh new ideas. Every month, we sit down with whether it be a game designer or a publisher, an artist, and we talk about the board gaming hobby and how they get games from just ideas into fleshed out games that we can play. Obviously, I don't have any games behind me. I'm dealing with some technical issues, so I'm using a backup location. But we're going to talk today to a designer that probably many in the board gaming hobby know or have heard of the name, and that is the gentleman by the name of Reiner Knizia. Reiner, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, and thank you for inviting me to the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time. I see all your prestigious awards behind you, which just speaks volumes to what you've done for this wonderful hobby over the last, how many years? 20, 30 years?
Shall I say luckily or unfortunately or both of it, more than this. It's almost 40 years now, but it depends how you count. When I got seriously involved in publishing, my first serious games got published in 1990, so that's about good 30 years now. Yes,
30 years.
But I've done games much before. I ran play-by-mail magazines and did lots of stuff. Yes.
So let's dive into that a little bit. What kind of is your journey into this hobby?
I think it's a very typical journey. The wonderful thing about our games industry is that all the people coming in through the love for the product, through the love for games. And so people play, we all play, and some people then become illustrators, some people then become interviewers, some people then become publishers, and some people become designers. So I got brave enough to design my first games, and then got braver and braver, had some successes, which fed my motivation. And so one thing takes to the other. But I think it's very typical. I'm more a scientist, so I may have a different approach to gaming than other people. Other people are storytellers, other people are fiction writers,
right.
I said painters, and this makes the variety of the. So if I say everybody takes the same route, yes, but everybody comes from a different background. That's to be understood. Yes.
So, what kind of games would you play growing up? Like, what were kind of some of your favorite games? Did you play games as a kid when you were growing up?
Yes, I always played as long as I can think, and it depends how long you take the growing up period. But initially, I was fascinated by piles of money, so the Monopoly money was piled up. I actually did my own big money banknotes, and that was pre-photocopying time. So that was a pretty hard job to do that. So that brought me later into the banking industry. So everything is essentially preset. And then I also used to play a lot with cars, with model cars, but have them run down little slopes and measure how long they go and see which one goes the furthest. Although that's the statistics, so I became a mathematician. But I think the more true story is that I grew up in a little town in southern Germany, and the only one who sold games was the barber. And his choice was very big, and my pocket money wasn't very big. So soon, when I wanted to play themes, which I couldn't find, I just did my own game with a theme which inspired me. And that's how more serious, not really serious, but more serious game design started, just to play with my friends.
Very cool. So what are you playing these days besides your own designs? What's hitting the table? Or do you even have time to play other people's games?
I don't. This is the reality. If you're in the wonderful situation that you actually make your hobby into a profession, then you lose a hobby. So you can't have it all and both ways or always. you know, I'm working on many different designs at the same time. And whenever people are around, and usually, I mean, we organize it really strictly. And so usually a play group comes every day, almost every day to us.
Wow.
And so we would play, but as there's so much in design, my favorite games are always the ones I'm designing, and they would always come to the table. Sometimes when we extend one of our brands, then of course we would play the old games. Sometimes playtesters who do behind my back play other games.
Okay.
And that's very important, because sometimes they would bring something and mention something and say, look, this is groundbreaking. You need to understand this. You need to know this. It doesn't mean that I hide away from the industry. You need to know what's going on. So I would look at videos. I would look at lots of games on the internet to understand what it is. But actually playing the games would happen very, very rarely due to I spent all my life playing games and still not have enough time.
So that leads me into my next question very well. Is game design still fun for you after having so many published games? And you said that it was a hobby, and now it's not a hobby, it's a job. Is game design still fun for you?
Game design is still absolute fun for me.
Okay.
Game design refreshes me, it energizes me. And when I know I can get up in the morning, as I did today, and see there are no other commitments, and I know I can design all day, that makes me the happiest man in the world.
Nice.
But the question is probably slightly different when you ask me, you really enjoy all aspects of your business?
Right.
And that, of course, is something else, because there are lots of, if you run a successful business, and I have some people working with me, it's a different matter. Not that I don't like the many other sides of the business, but this is a constant struggle to make enough time to do the designs. And I'm very hard on myself, or not very hard on myself, but I'm at least not lying to myself. I'm honest to myself, because I track the time, the hours I put into every design.
Yep.
And that means at the end of the week, I would also know how many hours I have spent on designing. And as I know that I essentially live in the office or in the studio, I know how much time I have spent on other things. Now, that doesn't mean that presenting games to publishers, going to fairs, looking at royalty reports, all the different things that show up in the operational business of the games business, if you're successful, are fun. And they give you a lot of rewards and satisfaction. Yeah. But as I say, I don't lie to myself. I say the best contribution I can do to the business is design games, and that's what I should focus on. And so probably I make it harder for me than I should, but I think, well, as I say, I'm a scientist, I'm a mathematician, so I do measure these things, and I do not kid myself. And having been busy isn't the aspect. Having been effective and successful designing is the point.
So how has like pitching, you say going to fairs and things like that, how has pitching like changed for you in the sense of you have so many games that you have designed? Do publishers come to you and say, hey, do you have a game that fits this time length with this player count in this, whether it's tile laying or set collection or whatever? Do you have people just coming to you pitching? They want things for you, or do you go to them?
Well, it's both ways. And you can't really even differentiate between it, because we keep very close relationships to many of the publishers. So we are in communication. We would understand the publisher's needs, the publisher's strategies, the publisher's possibly short-term gaps where they need to fill something. And the publishers know that our games this comes from the playtesting, are very well tested and they work. And so sometimes they come to us and say, we are building a new line. Of course, time is always running out. Sure, do you have a few card games of this and this and this? And then we have, our portfolio is about 800 games, which are published. And then, I'm not really saying this too often, but we have more than 100 unpublished games here, which we show to different publishers. So if somebody comes and say, I desperately need something like this, or I'm interested in this, we can always have a look. And we would usually, our our challenge is usually not, okay, we don't have anything to show. Our challenge is more, there's too much. We can't overwhelm the other one and not essentially spend time on not fitting products. So therefore, we need to understand very well what the publisher is looking for. And then we would find and pick out the games which we think is the best fit. And then we would take a few long shots, and very often we get surprised that the long shots hit and not what we think is best fit. And that's also a learning curve to say, well, however much you discuss, words can only describe that much. Putting the game on the table, talking about it, maybe starting a little bit of the play test with the publisher just communicates that much more.
So how do you know when a game is done? Like, obviously, if a publisher is like, hey, we need this done by X day, then you know the game is done by X day. But if you have kind of that open window, how do you know when a game is done? When you're like, you know, because so often I've used this analogy in other interviews. I cook lots, and you know, just recently I made breadsticks again, and I always have the same recipe, but then I'm always like, I'm gonna try something else, and I know recipe A is amazing, but I'm like, I'm gonna just tweak it a little bit and try this, and like, surely that happens in game design, but how do you know like when a game is done?
The game is not done when the date is set as X date. The game is done when it is perfect.
Okay.
So the first very critical point is when we are talking with a publisher of designing a new game. And that, of course, happens as well, particularly when we involving brands, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars and so on. Then we would not do games for licenses because we don't know what licenses the publishers will offer us. But to do games about, we don't have the rights to do that. So that's a waiting thing. Also, we don't want to just take a given game and then pull over the theme. So I would start understanding the brands and understanding what the fans of this particular property would expect, and then work from there. And the very dangerous thing here is to set too tight targets. And I avoid doing this. I would usually, before I agree to a brief, spend a lot of time, which is sometimes wasted because then we can't agree or it's too long and so on. But, or if it's just a, let's say, a casual question, could you do that? For me, that takes quite a lot of time then to go into it, so that I don't promise things which I then, you can always make stories and say, of course I can do it, and I can do it by next week and so on, but you suffer afterwards, you know. And no game can be done by next week. So what I'm trying to do is be realistic, and when the publisher cannot be realistic because of undue deadlines or boundary conditions, then I just say, no, it can't be done, because if I agree to a date, and there is some leeway in it because it never goes as you plan, then I keep my dates, and therefore I need enough time for that. But when is a game done? Essentially, a game is done when we play it several times in the different testing groups, and the rules do no longer change. And of course, we enjoy the game. I would never let a game out which I'm not convinced of. But then I still let the game usually rest for a few weeks, and then take it out one final time and play it once or twice with this distance. You know, when you have different play groups, it helps you avoiding conventions of one play group. You always play this way, and then the game is out in the market, and these people play a different way. It's not how I intended. No, that doesn't help you. It's how the players play it, how the people play it. And so with this distance, it shows me once again, do I really enjoy the game? Now I feel like a newcomer, and I have the ambition to do perfect games, and we test a very lot of these games. But of course, games are always a matter of taste. So even if I say our games are well tested, our games all work and are balanced, that doesn't mean that everybody likes every of our games, because people expect different things and people have different likings. And that's why our industry is so rich, because there is a place for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing, what you just said. There's so many games, and yet everybody has different opinions on what they like and what they don't like. And you know, I think those change as we grow in the hobby. You know, games that I liked, you know, maybe 5-6 years ago, I'm not necessarily a fan of as highly now because it's not that it's been overplayed, because I don't feel anybody really overplays any games in this hobby when there's so many of them. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about My City and My Island, which I just got a copy of My Island, just started. I absolutely loved. My wife and I did My City. Absolutely loved My City. This is kind of maybe twofold, and so when you built both games, or specifically, yeah, when you built both games, did you have a start and a finish, and you filled in the gaps, or you just started and was like, hey, like I don't want to spoil too much of My City if those watching haven't played it, but just the different things that you add. Did you have that fleshed out conceptually before you started the design, or you just built it as it went?
With some of the newer games like El Dorado or also, as you say, My City, there was a deliberate attempt behind that to take a genre, which I like, but think maybe the general games in this genre are too complex to reach the really wide public. And there are lots of people who don't really find the access to that. And then I'm trying to reach lots of people. Bringing enjoyment to the people is our motto of the business. And so for El Dorado, it was making deck building more approachable. And for My City, which we are discussing here, it was legacy games. A lot of legacy games are quite complex. And the complexity increases with all the rules and all the settings and everything people need to handle. And so my ambition was to make a legacy game which can be sold at an affordable price, which matches the casual, I mean, not the totally inexperienced player, but the casual game player, and which has a playing time, and this all goes together, of maybe half an hour, not much more per episode, so that people can really enjoy the essence of a legacy game without being overwhelmed by it. So that was the starting point there. And then, of course, it was the search for what is the mechanism, how can we get a right theme on it. And I mean, this is always the point in designing. I cannot really say, apart from this starting point, what came first and what went next. It's just me sitting and closing my eyes and playing around in front of me, seeing player on the left, seeing player on the right, taking my turn. And so one thing comes to another, and eventually there is a concept which, I mean, subconsciously you throw a lot of things out, and eventually something focuses on that. And so yes, I was maybe lucky because I found this approach that everybody can play at the same time, which is good. You don't have any downtimes. And I found something which people like. This is kind of a puzzly aspect in there, but not too brainy, because people want to move on with the game. And then we have I think we had a nice theme, and it all made sense. And it was, I mean, as you know, legacy games are very complex in testing and very complex in designing, because you need to go through the whole episodes, our 8 chapters of 3 games, and then you need to understand, okay, now I changed something in chapter 2. What consequences does this have? And you're always playing not one game, but the whole series.
So was the design kind of similar in both My City and My Island? Like, did you kind of have the same structure? Of course, My City is polyominoes, and My Island are, I guess they'd be I don't know, a hex tile.
Yes.
Was kind of the framework the same?
Well, the first game is always more difficult to design in a way, because you're starting with nothing. Once you have a basis for a game, as we did with Tigers Euphrates and then had Yellow and Yangtze, you know where to start, you know what elements you want to keep, but then of course the challenge is still you don't want to recopy the same game.
Right.
It's very much understanding what is the essence of the game, what do people expect, the simultaneous play, turning up a card, but of course then the challenges themselves had to be very different. So essentially it wasn't planned as it was planned as a single game. You never know how things work out. And then we had the roll and write My City, and then I suggested and we decided that we would do a second big game, and we discussed a lot the title, but I think The Island, which is not quite true once you have played it through, but I'm not giving away any spoilers.
Okay.
So we thought that's a wonderful setting again, very different, with very different thematic opportunities in that second game.
Yeah, and again, I'm only 3 episodes in, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I just love the tiling. I love the spatial aspect. And so I'm excited to open up more of those envelopes and see how the game progresses. Is this going to be a trilogy of big box My Games? Can you say it? And if you can't?
Yeah. This is a very difficult question for me because My Island has very much disappointed me about the delays it incurred with the publisher. The game should have been out 1.5 years ago, and there were some very disappointing processes. There is still a wonderful relationship with Cosmos, not to get that wrong.
Absolutely.
This project did not go well. And essentially, I finally gave up and walked away from that project and say, okay, enough done. You either publish it or you don't. So enough said, but the consequence is there will not be any more games in that family with Cosmos.
Okay. And I guess maybe that kind of goes back to the things of you love designing, but some of these other things that go with designing and getting games published that you don't like as much, right?
No, it's not. It don't like as much isn't the right thing, but I have always got in the back of my mind, this is not what I should be doing. Yes, if my responsibility were go to publishers and position the games and explain them, then I would be very happy to do it, and then I would be annoyed having to play test because that's not my job. Yes, but I think I want to do what I do best and what I can least delegate, and that is designing the games. And this means I put a lot of effort into it, and this also means that I am dependent on publishers then bringing the games to life and adding wonderful aspects. And Cosmos has added wonderful aspects to the games, and bringing them to life and bringing them out there. But yeah, as I say, this process didn't work so well. So a long time ago, I said, this is the last one in this series.
Okay. So I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a scientist of any sorts of, but I did hear from a friend of mine who's a mathematician that they just recently discovered an aperiodic monotile. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. It's a very interesting point, because throughout the historic development of this tiling series, people always thought they had found proofs that these are the only tiles you can find which go symmetrically or asymmetrically and fill up the whole entire plane. And then suddenly somebody finds a new one, and so we say, but we have proven it. Well, you obviously haven't, because there's another one, and that happened several times. So I'm not quite sure which one you're referring to now, but I recently saw another report that something new came up. And
and so I don't know much about it, but I'm just wondering, like, say this thing is functional, would you design a game with an aperiodic monotile? Like, have you thought about that?
You're raising a very interesting point. Where to start with a game design?
Okay.
I think the essence of my experience is that I will always try to start with something innovative, and then I have the best chances to realize my ambition to create something innovative with every design I do. And so if these tiles and this tiling gives an entry point, which makes an interesting game, yes, it could be, but you cannot press everything into a game which you see.
Right.
So I have done tile laying games. Tile laying games were very popular in the 90s. There are the classics I mentioned, Tigers and Euphrates, Samurai, and all these games. Tiling is not so much in favor these days, even though the classics are still well sought after. So it would have to be something completely new, puzzle. I don't know. Well, if I knew, I would do it. But so I'm constantly on the lookout for new ideas, but then it will spark something. At the moment, these tiles haven't sparked anything with me.
Okay, that's fine. That's I was just curious. Do you have, you have a ton of games published to your credit. Do you have a favorite one of yours? And maybe that is, one that just was sparked out of nothing and you're like, that's amazing. Do you have kind of a favorite title that you have designed? It's like picking your favorite child. I fully understand that.
Exactly. That would have been my answer. It's, the truth, I think, for all of us is, I don't think anybody actually has an absolute favorite game. It always depends with whom you're playing. It depends on the situation. If you have a favorite game which plays 3 hours, you wouldn't pick it up in a half-hour coffee play or in the pub. So it depends on the players. It depends on the mood. And for me, I'm not playing games very often. So when I have a game which is not in development, so the favorite games are the ones, I guess, which are in development, but neither games which are developed or designed by other players nor mine will come onto the table a lot. And yes, if they come onto the table, the classic games of mine, yes, I remember exactly what fascinated me, and quite a number of these games have stood the test of time. Some others had their time, and that's fine as well, because as you say, time moves on, life moves on, games move on, and games are a mirror of our lives, of our time, and so different things are relevant for different people at the moment than they were 10 years or 20 years or 30 years ago. And so quite naturally, some of these will no longer be so relevant, will no longer be so sought after, and that's absolutely fine. And the worst mistake one can do is then try to press them back onto the market. Then one can let them rest in peace, so to speak, because they had their life and they had their wonderful life, and that's what more can you expect? Yes.
Right. So do as we get close to wrapping up, kind of what you said there, I think sometimes, like you said, no one really has like an all-time favorite game. And I'm wondering sometimes, as we play these games, do we actually, like, yes, there's an aspect that we like the physical game, but I'm wondering sometimes if we like the community and the friendship and the memories. That's such a millennial thing to say, but do we sometimes like those more than the actual game? Like, you know what I mean? Like in the hobby, are we in love with the experiences and the fun and the memories and the joy it brings? Or are we actually in love with the, you know what I mean? In love with the game. And I think I would just think about that. And I think it kind of, it brings an interesting thing to think about, because you kind of said, like, no one really has a favorite game. It's maybe their favorite game because of this, or to play at this location or with this people. And so I don't know, you don't have to add anything to that. It's just something that you said and I was thinking about. Just sometimes, I don't know, it's just something to think about.
I think this is the wonderful aspect of board games, that the board games bring people together. And after all, we are social beings, and so very few people of us want to lock themselves away and not speak to other people and not be with other people. And so it is this joint moment of joy, experience, challenge, competition, which we are allowed to live through a game, and the game offers us the platform to enjoy that. And there are so many platforms. This is overwhelming, but that's wonderful, because the opposite would be it's boring. We don't have anything more to do. And what I expect from life, that there are so many wonderful things and there's never enough time, I expect from a single game as well, that I want to be there and being fascinated by so many things to do and so few turns.
Right on. My final question, you have so many games published. Do you have a copy of all of them in a room, in your studio? What does that look like? Like hundreds and hundreds of games that you've designed. Do you have a copy of every one of them?
Yes, with one or two exceptions where we found out years later that the publisher had published some and never gave us samples. We have far more than 2,000 different copies, because when I talk about 800 games, of course, some games have just got one edition, but many games have many different language editions, many different republications, re-editions. So we have one of each of them. And that is a big, a big archive, a big library for us. And we go there because we need to know how games, how the games are, if there are questions, if you want to develop something in the neighborhood of it, if you want to extend the brand. And we also have a big cupboard of counterfeits. And again, our library here helps us to see, is that actually a game we did, or is that a copy? So with respect to, I mean, China is the worst part of that. They simply photocopy. There are lots of honest and very decent people in China, to say that as well, and very honest and very trustworthy publishers. But the general and they suffer from these copies as well as we do. But the general acceptance is not so high for copyrights as it is here. And so you see that things just simply get photocopied or reproduced and then put out with cheap components. It hurts everybody, because the publisher in China loses the business. The people are disappointed. Then they look at the brand or at my name and say these games are not good. So there are lots of things, lots of aspects with that. But the question was the other one, and the joy is, yes, we have many nice games and we have them all there. But I do not go there and play every day, so I'm not crazy. But yes, this is important for me. I love the games, and I do not understand why publishers, for example, not have a copy of all of their games. Yes, it's but our industry is somewhat a little bit overcrowded by too many brand managers who come from many different industries, sell washing power today, do games for 2 years, and then go on and sell perfume. And that's not working, because our products are different. They are not just the white powder. Our products need the soul. They have a soul, and you need to look after them. They are living beings.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time, Reiner. This has been an absolute blast. Getting to know, the ins and outs of how you go about game design and whatnot. And, I truly believe that community is built on conversation, much like this. And just like games are built on ideas, and you've had hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and you continually bring forth more and more ideas. And, of course, if you want to know more about Reiner's work, Board Game Geek, search his encyclopedia of games, reinerknizia.com. I'll post a link to where you can find more about his stuff in the description of this video. And Reiner, I just want to take this time and say thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Right on. So, of course, if you want to know more about Cloudy with Chance of Meeples, we're on Facebook, Cloudy with Chance of Meeples. Until next time, grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with the Chance of Meeples.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember to grab your umbrella, because the forecast is cloudy with a chance of meeples.